Дуже дякую тим, хто якраз є на нашому семінарі. Це вже свідчення того, що тема є цікавою, що проблематика, яка сьогодні заявлена у доповіді нашої гостьової професорки із Віденського університету, пані професор, доктор Керстін Йобст, є цікавою для багатьох людей і для нас, особливо у католицькому університеті. Це нагода для того, щоб шукати можливостей для міждисциплінарного діалогу. Я також вдячний особливо тим, які не є богословами чи не працюють на богословському факультеті, але колись були і не поривають зв'язків з нами. Романе, дуже дякую, не знаю, з тобою, напевно, також із колега з музею. Так що це приємно. Ми маємо представництво наших згромаджень і, зокрема, святого Йосафата згромадження. Так що це також приємно. Очікуємо наших отців, братів Васильян. Але сьогоднішня тема і фокус сьогоднішньої проблематики буде зосереджений не стільки, так би мовити, на якісь суто внутрішньо-богословські перспективи, як радше на певний ширший контекст запровадження і контроверсій навколо культу Йосафата Кунцевича від часу його запровадження і, можливо, і у пізніші періоди. Кілька слів про нашу гостю. Професор Йобст мала таку траєкторію руху від дослідження соціал-демократії Галичини, насамперед через польську перспективу. Це характерно для німецької історичної школи Східної Європи. Польща була важливим центром, але, як бачимо, вже тоді зацікавлення також заторкувало і українську соціал-демократію, і в той спосіб ми, зрештою, також познайомилися. Наша спільна перша любов – це Галичина, і це нас єднає саме на дослідження нашого краю. Ми часто зустрічалися на різних конференціях, підтримували, наскільки можливо. Принаймні, я відчував завжди дуже таку добру підтримку з боку нашої гості для українських дослідників, для можливостей реалізації різних проєктів. Після цього була проблематика Криму, дослідження навіть не стільки Криму такого, як такого, а радше топосу Криму у російській імперській політиці і ідеології. І для тих, хто цікавиться цією ще темою, або якщо ви знаєте таких людей, завтра в колегіумі в 7-й годині буде така відкрита зустріч зі студентами колегіуму саме на тему Крим як святая земля Росії чи російська свята земля. Це якби анонс завтрашньої події. Ну і так би мовити, останніми роками темою досліджень, темою рефлексій нашої гості була проблематика пошанування святих, але, власне, у контексті політичному, у контексті суспільному, у контексті тих контроверсій, які завжди виникають між різними етнічними, конфесійними групами щодо тих чи інших постатей. І ми тут маємо багато таких прикладів. Взагалі, я хотів би сказати, трошки орієнтуюся в німецькій історіографії, ми можемо говорити про певний навіть такий тренд. Кілька дослідників займалися цими темами, зокрема, професор Вюнш, якого ми знаємо, який у нас бував, він досліджував культ Яна з Дуклі, який для українців є, так би мовити, чимось трошки іншим, ніж для поляків. І вже тут є цікаві, так би мовити, моменти різних перспектив на одну і ту саму постать. Я думаю, що більшість із вас читали коротку інформацію, я більше не буду займати часу для такого мого вступного слова. Я ще раз хочу подякувати Керстін за те, що вона згодилася до нас приїхати, що вона знайшла віконечко в своєму графіку. Ну і я думаю, ми всі зараз зацікавлені почути, що нам скажуть.
Yes, thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Oleg, not only for the invitation and the possibility to be here in this amazing place called UKU. And I already told you that I will make propaganda for this institution, not only in Vienna. And I'm also very glad that you already mentioned my perspective on Yosafat Kунцевич, because it's somehow a bit dangerous, I thought, before, to speak here in the center of the veneration of Yosafat Kунцевич about a less spiritual and more political perspective. That means that my words, my lecture will concentrate on a more or less political, historical perspective. And afterwards, of course, we can discuss some questions, and I'm looking forward for your questions. Okay.
You need mic or not?
Oh, do you understand me? It's fine? Okay.
It's okay?
Yeah,
Without?
okay, okay. If I will lost my voice.
I hope not.
Okay, let's start. The story of the veneration of the Greek Catholic Archbishop of Polotsk, Vitebsk and Mstislav, Yosafata Kунцевича, is basically the story of an impressive holy career. He was beatified in 1643, only 20 and not the normal 50 years after his death, but it took more than 200 years until his canonization, when he became a martyr saint in 1867. His cult had already emerged in the early 17th century, and despite some setbacks, has continued to develop ever since. Today it is most visible among you, the Greek Catholic believers in Ukraine, especially in the western parts, and to a much more limited extent among Greek Catholic Belarusians. He is also worshipped by Greek Catholics and Roman Catholic Polish citizens, and in the Polish and Ukrainian diasporas he has his followers too. Important centers can be found in the United States, in Canada and in Brazil, to name just a few examples. The cult transcends national, ethnic and denominational borders, and that's quite normal for saints. Josaphat cannot be understood as a national saint either in the Polish or in the Ukrainian context, because he does not fit into the usual patterns of national patrons in East and Central Eastern Europe. To which historians have paid so much attention in recent times, as these patrons played a decisive role in narratives of national renaissance. Josaphat could not easily be instrumentalized for such national narratives due to the historical grounded denominational fragmentation in the Ukraine with its predominantly Orthodox population. Nevertheless, he must be regarded as a significant saint for several reasons. His importance lies in the globality in an imagined Christian world, and in the fact that Josaphat was the first to be established as a canonical saint and martyr of the Greek Catholic Church after the Union of Brest with Rome. Moreover, even today he is considered to be a part of the living archives in parts of Central Eastern and in most Slavic diaspora communities. His veneration is an excellent example that allows deeper insights into the politics of religion and religious practices in Eastern Europe and beyond. Moreover, in order to understand his career, one must also inquire into the trans-denominational, trans-ethnic, trans-territorial and trans-epochal aspects of the veneration of saints in general. Here you see already in his visualization that he is trans-epochal and trans-ethnical. Over the time, Josaphat's cult became an expression of practiced piety and a political resource for different religious and ethnic agents. From its beginnings, the cult displayed a clearly inclusive, trans-denominational character. This was sufficient to foster the coexistence of Roman and Greek Catholic in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealths on the one hand, and to exclude the Orthodox, the so-called schismatics, the Russians, on the other. It is precisely the successful use of the martyr as an anti-Orthodox, anti-Russian, and, after the revolution of 1970, anti-Soviet symbol that became characteristic for the Josaphat cult in the long durée. Thus, the veneration of Josaphat can be seen as an important element in the trans-denominational competition that is typical in the context of confessionalization. In the following, I will provide a short biographical sketch and then introduce Josaphat as a traveling saint and as a distinctive anti-Orthodox and anti-Russian symbol within Polish and Catholic-dominated discourse. My focus will then lie on the implementation of Josaphat's veneration in the Habsburg monarchy and his career in the context of the monarchy. Here, the Josaphat cult was a rather recent phenomenon. While he was traditionally venerated in the northeastern parts of the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealths, the Josaphat cult was nearly unknown in the Habsburg Empire until the middle of the 19th century, and I have always discussions with Frank Sisson on that point. Josaphat's entry into the history of the Habsburg monarchy was achieved by the Roman Catholic Polish and Ruthenian, that means Ukrainian, Greek Catholic population of the Cisleitanian crown land Galicia, and by the position that the Austrian Emperor claimed for himself as a spiritual and political leader in a Catholic empire of believers of all faiths. Less well known is that the science relics that were kept in Vienna for several decades also established a link to the First Republic of Austria, indicating Josaphat's central position in a very complex Catholic belief system in Central and East Central Europe. According to the numerous hagiographic accounts, Josaphat lived the ideal life of a classic saint and later martyr. Born as a son of Orthodox parents to a family of petty bourgeois origin, he showed signs to deep religiosity and special designation even as a child. During his apprenticeship as a merchant in Vilnius as a young man, he refused to marry his master's daughter and to become his successor. And in the language of hagiography, this means that he renounced early on the pursuit of worldly goods and sexuality. In 1604, Josaphat entered into the then Orthodox Order of the Basilians in Vilnius, where he demonstrated his thirst for knowledge through intensive studies of Latin and Old Church Slavonic writings. There he came into contact with the Jesuits for the first time. The Jesuit order, founded in 1534, served as a powerful intellectual avant-garde of Roman Catholicism. Under its influence, and especially through his acquaintance with Joseph Williamin Rudzki, who will become the Greek Catholic Metropolitan Bishop of Kiev, Josaphat became a devoted follower with an impressive knowledge of the Slavonic Byzantine liturgical literature and a fierce fighter for the union of Brest. This church union had placed the Metropolia of Kiev-Harlech and all Rus under the authority of the Pope in Rome by more or less retaining the traditional Eastern rites. As a great orator, Josaphat won a large number of Orthodox Ruthenians for Catholicism. In 1609 he was ordained a priest and subsequently became the superior of several monasteries. From 1618 until his violent death, he was the Archbishop of Polotsk, Vitebsk and Mstislav. And on November the 12th, in 1623, during a visitation of his eparchy, Orthodox citizens murdered Josaphat in a typical martyr-like manner. He suffered a double martyrdom with an axe stroke to his head and a bullet fired from the mob. And that was the end of Josaphat, hated by the Orthodox of Vitebsk and by many Orthodox believers in the whole eparchy. Because of his impressive ability for proselytism, they had given him the nickname Duschewrat, soul snatcher, and Josafat's death marked the birth of a Catholic martyr of the Byzantine Rite. On the one hand, the murder was a consequence of the Union of Brest itself. On the other hand, it was the outcome of Josafat's politics. The Union of 1596, one of the several attempts to overcome the Great Schism of 1045, resulted from the initiative of the higher Orthodox clergy. Basically, the clergy wanted to improve its position in the Polish-Lithuanian state, which was disadvantaged in comparison to the Roman Catholics. The union was also strongly supported by the King of Poland and the Grand Duke of Lithuania, Zygmunt Czechoslovakia. However, the Orthodox bishops of Lviv and Przemysl, prominent nobles of Ruthenian origin, and the Cossacks, so important for the shaping of an Orthodox identity in the Ukrainian context, were uncompromising enemies of this, not only spiritual alliance with Rome. And here you can see, and that's very astonishing all the time, that the center of renovation traveled from the north, here is in red, to the south, until like it is today. While Josaphat succeeded in reconciling at least the majority of the residents and Polacks with the Union, the rest of his eparchy remained hostile to the project, and its bishop showed little understanding for their negative attitude. Those priests who did not confess to the union with Rome were relieved of their duties. Church property in pro-Orthodox hands was confiscated, and he took legal actions against insubordinate cities such as Muchilev, where the majority was still Orthodox. Josaphat was not a man of consensus. Despite these tensions, a vigorous cult arose after Josaphat's death, not only in Poland, but in the whole Rzeczpospolita. Regardless of his veneration, it is not clear if and to what extent it helped to strengthen the rather weak collective identity of confessional Greek Catholics in the Ruthenian lands, even though Josaphat's martyrdom doubtlessly increased the social capital of this new denomination of the Catholics of the Byzantine Rite that until then had been regarded as inferior in the eyes of Roman Catholic clergy and nobility. The cult has the potential to develop into a useful tool of trans-denominational coexistence for Roman and Greek Catholics in Poland, Lithuania. In this respect, it was an inclusive strategy. At the same time, it was exclusionary because it served as an anti-Orthodox, anti-Russian spiritual weapon. Just one example is Josaphat's implementation as a holy helper in battles. Even before the devastating wars with the neighboring powers in the mid-17th century, the so-called Deluge, Potop, Josaphat was celebrated as a savior from the threats of the denominational and ethnical other in hagiographic accounts. When Swedish troops attacked the city of Polotsk in 1627, or when an army of Muscovites invaded the Lithuanian Grand Duchy in 1633, the enemies retreated when they noticed that a group of armed men under the leadership of the martyr Josaphat himself drew near. Quote, "But when the Russians tried to take the castle where Josaphat's body was kept, they saw armed troops under the command of the martyr on the walls, and immediately they took flight." Unquote. Many other miracles were attributed to him as well. Yet, in such narrations, Josaphat is not only a Christian saint, but also a male hero. And this notion which reflects common pattern of the saint as a virile barrier, exceeds the strictly religious context and fits into wider belief system, into a wider belief system about masculinity and patriarchy. In the following centuries, as you can see, Josaphat did not become a resident saint, permanently integrated in the town of Pollux and in the Old Rus, but a kind of traveling martyr. Right after his death in November 1623, his corpse was transferred from Vitebsk, the scene of the crime, to Pollux as the center of Josaphat's epoch. In 1652, because of the invading troops from Moscow, the ossa veneranda, the venerated bones, were evacuated to Suprassil, where they were kept until 1667, when they returned to Polotsk. In 1685, they were rescued again for security reasons, and this time to the Baris and Gleb monastery near Grodno. Between 1687 and 1705, Josaphat's body was venerated in Polotsk, and in the town, and the town developed into one of the most visited places of pilgrimage in the Polish-Lithuanian state. Because of the Great Northern War in the early 18th century, the bones of the blessed were relocated once again, and this time to Biała Podlaska. At the end of the 18th century, the formerly intense veneration of blessed Josaphat diminished for some decades due to the political turmoil that resulted from the dissolution of the Polish state. The bones stayed in Biała Podlaska for the next several decades. Here, in 1873, 1874, a century after the first partition of Poland, and in the context of the final liquidation of the Greek Catholic Church and the Russian Empire, the relics were immured in the monastery church of the Besalian order, and Josaphat's bones were withdrawn from public veneration on the initiative of the Russians. When Austro-Hungarian troops occupied this area during the First World War, Vienna ordered the transfer of the relics to the Austrian capital. And for the next more than 20 years, they were kept in the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church of St. Barbara, located in the heart of the city, in the so-called Ersten Bezirk, near the Stephansdom. And in 1923, the architect Karl Holy, a very important architect, who would become the principal architect in charge of the restoration of the St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna, created the chapel of St. Josaphat for the specific purpose of housing the relics. The chapel is still in existence today, yet it retains, as you perfectly know, only a single bone splitter of the saint, because he, Josaphat, left Vienna, having been rescued once again. In 1949, the relics were transferred in a clandestine action to Vatican City. And since 1963, they have been kept in the altar of St. Basil in the Papal Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, underscoring emphatically the importance of the saint as a martyr of the entire Catholic Church. Clearly, St. Josaphat traveled a lot. Yet it is noteworthy that all transfers of the saint's remains were explained with a threat by an ethnic, national, and denominational other, providing St. Josaphat with his distinct sacral, spiritual, and political significance. And this pattern, the necessity to rescue the bones of the venerated martyr, killed by the blows of the axes of the schismatics, attained a clearly nationalistic and anti-Russian emphasis in the course of the 19th century. In retrospect, it is surprising that the Josaphat cult was rather unpopular with and even strongly rejected by the majority of the unionate Greek Catholic population in the Habsburg 19th century Kingdom of Galicia and Lodomeria. Ukrainian nationalism and the Greek Catholic Church doubtlessly play an important role in today's Western Ukraine, that means here. But that the Josaphat cult is one component in this becomes apparent in the St. George's Cathedral in Lviv, with its impressive icon, however. I just saw it a couple of days ago, the second time, and it's always a very impressive inspiration. However, in Josaphat's former eparchy, today is a part of Belarus, and in the region of Biała-Podlaska, today in Poland, where his relics were kept for so many years, the development of this cult took a fundamentally different route. While Josaphat became an essential propagandistic tool in the political fight against the Russian occupying power in the 19th century, today he plays no decisive role in lived piety. First and foremost, this is a result of the decidedly anti-Greek Catholicism in the Russian Empire and anti-religious reflexes in Soviet times. In the 19th century, even the spiritual appeal to Josaphat automatically had a negative impact in St. Petersburg. And this was due to the fact that after the Polish uprisings of 1830, 1831, and in 1863-64, everything connected with the Union of Brest and the Greek Catholic Church became part of the so-called Polish question and was therefore considered dangerous for St. Petersburg. The, as the Russian called it, liberation of the Greek Catholics from the harmful influence of the Poles and Rome and the reunion, that's the official language of the Russian state, with the Orthodox Church became a central aim of Russian domestic policy. Moreover, the official Russian Orthodox concept of identity comprised neither Catholic Russians nor a distinct Ukrainian nationality. Like the Belarusians, the Ukrainians, officially named Little Russians, were regarded as a branch of the collective Russian family, and the Russians were, of course, the eldest brother or even the father. One result was the final dissolution of the Greek Catholic organization of Chelm in 1875. And with many other cases, this act was a precipitous and unexpected incident, unplanned and uncoordinated, combined with brutal repressions, having the final effect of aggravating and alienating all concerned. In Habsburg Galicia, the situation was different, as the Habsburg considered themselves as Catholic rulers and patrons of the Catholic faith of all denominations. In Austria, the Ruthenian Church was, at least in principle, not a confession of minor privilege. As well, the Ruthenian Church had already been used in the last decades of the 18th century as an object of the Habsburg policies of divide et impera, and hence had been promoted in this crownland at the expense of the Polish-dominated Roman Catholic Church. Vienna granted more or less equal rights to the two confessions. You know this because Oleg made several research on this topic. This constituted a good basis for the promotion of the denomination and over time for the implementation of the Josaphat cult. In the monarchy, the veneration of the martyr had no anti-Austrian component. In the first half of the 19th century, Josaphat was still a rather unknown and even unpopular saint in the Galician lands, as I mentioned already before. The result was quite an unusual situation when the Holy See finally approved Josafat's canonization in 1867, conducted by parts of the Greek Catholic hierarchy and the majority of the Ruthenian believers in Galicia showed little enthusiasm for their new saint. Obviously, the influence of the virulent anti-unionist tendency among the Greek Catholic priests who rejected the worship of the anti-Orthodox soul snatcher from the north was strong. In the second half of the 19th century, the debate between Ukrainians who were pro-Russian, pro-Orthodox, the so-called Russophiles, and the so-called Ukrainophiles, on the other hand, regarded the future of their national identity had not yet come to a conclusion, which in turn even influenced the denominational question. In the most widely circulated newspapers among Western Ukrainians in the 1860s, the Russophile paper Slovo, the Word, the martyr was called very often an enemy of the Byzantine Rite, and there was a number of anti-Josaphat articles. For good reasons, the campaign for Josafat's canonization appeared to many Ruthenians in Galicia as pro-Polish, as a pro-Polish Latin propaganda. In fact, the revitalization of the somewhat forgotten blessed Josaphat in the second half of the 19th century is connected to the failed January uprising of 1863-1864. Polish, and that means, of course, mostly Roman Catholic, patriotic elites inside and outside the Polish territories tried to use every means to build up a trans-denominational international of Catholics to support the Polish cause, and among them the Catholic martyr Josaphat. Several months before the January uprising, some future Polish insurgent provided a decisive impetus to the revival of his cult by undertaking a pilgrimage to his relic in Biała, which was not yet immured. They were equipped with an impressive painting of the martyr and declared himself as their patron saint. This was a symbolic repetition of his acclamation as a patron of the Polish crown in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania in 1673. Among the Polish national awakened elites, this theme was quite popular in this time because of the famous Polish writer Adam Mickiewicz, an undisputed national hero, who has described and reiterated Josafat's elevation in his Księgi Narodu Polskiego I Pielgrzymstwa Polskiego. On the eve of the 1863 uprising, the man on Josafat's grave intended, as the Ukrainian Basilian monk Kozanevich aptly remarked in 1902, I quote, "to wake the Ukrainians for their foolish uprising," unquote. In his opinion, the spectacle in Biała gave the Russians power the opportunity to complete their diabolical work against the Uniates, the poor Ukrainian, and an opportunity for which the schismatic, the Orthodox, had waited for such a long time. And, indeed, 4 of the 5 remaining Basilian monasteries were liquidated and, quote, "the blood of the poor Uniates poured forth above the earth," unquote. In the following years, the Greek Catholic believers were persecuted rigorously. In 1863, the so-called Valuyev Circular prohibited the publication of religious literature and literature used for school training in Ukrainian, and it was followed by the Ems Ukaz of 1876, banning the use of Ukrainian language in print, with the exception of the reprinting of historical sources. And this measure marked a peak in the attempts of politicians to enforce Russification in the Russian Empire. The Polish side used another, more inclusive strategy towards the Ukrainians, trying to exploit the not yet finished nation-building process of the East Slavic Ruthenians for their own national purposes, in the sense of Genterutenus Natione Polonus. The Greek Catholic martyr played a certain role in this conception. The Poles stressed Josafat's anti-Orthodox and anti-Russian qualities and interpreted them as pro-Polish. Finally, both sides ignored the fact that another, more modern belief system was on its way, despite the strong impact of ethno-confessionalization among the small nations of East Central Europe. Small just in the meaning of Miroslav Koch, not in numbers. The more or less secular nation was on its way. By the middle of the 19th century, neither a Catholic pro-Polish nor an Orthodox Russian option was attractive for Ruthenian intellectual elites anymore. In particular, Ukrainian national activists in Galicia viewed the popularization of the cult in Saint Josaphat in this way as just